Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I had sincerely hoped that we would be talking about the stimulus package that would have passed through the Senate, that McConnell and Toomey and the GOP would have come around to the HEROES Act and said, yes, we need to get stimulus money into the pockets of workers. We need to get money into the communities. We need to make sure that our schools don't go broke, that our states don't go belly up, that yes, the federal government is going to actually help and solve some serious problems. I was really hoping that was going to happen. I was hoping they were going to say, no, we're going to extend the extra unemployment insurance till the end of the year, till we find out how this goes on. I was hoping they would say, we're going to extend the stimulus checks, that you're going to get something soon. Help is on the way. I was really hoping. And I was clicking right up into the last minute going, something's good. Something's going to happen. It didn't. And again, it was one of those moments, not like a kid on Christmas when you didn't get the toy you wanted, because I didn't expect anything from the Republicans. I've learned that lesson over the last 15 years. But it's kind of surprising to me. Now, the sticking points are all over the place. They blame Trump and his demand for a payroll tax, which is a bad idea. But oddly enough, it's something Republicans have been in favor of, to destroy Social Security anyway. McConnell evidently wants to destroy Social Security in a different way. He's got his own path towards the destruction of Social Security. So I guess they're united on that front. There was some talk yesterday about taking that $600 down to $100, and then maybe $200, and then maybe a stimulus check by the beginning of August. A lot of stuff, but nothing. In fact, nothing until next week. So there'll be nothing to talk about on this front tomorrow, other than they've failed to do their job again. And you know whose paycheck will be in the bank tomorrow? Theirs. You know who won't? Some 40 million people who don't have jobs. And the 1.4 million additional claims last week, which is telling us that the unemployment numbers aren't going down. So this is one of those moments where, and I keep asking, why the Republicans don't jump at what the Democrats have given them, which is a $3.4 billion HEROES bill to get money into the states, to get money into people's hands, to prop up the economy so it doesn't collapse before a major election. I don't know. I don't. Sometimes there are things beyond explanation. Now those explanations are maybe they've figured out they're going to win an election by doing all of the lying, cheating, and stealing that they've gotten used to. But it is what it is. So here we are, 4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 already. Thank you, Florida, Texas, as the hospitalization rates in those states have skyrocketed. Now understand, we passed 2 million cases on June the 10th. We hit 3 million cases on July the 7th. And by the 23rd of July, we are up to 4 million cases. So August, I guess 4.5, 5.5 maybe. Is this what we're expecting, an explosion? But that's not the worst part of it. More than 143,000 people are dead. And as I said, the hospitalization is just skyrocketing. In those states that are being affected by it, what's happening is you're blowing out the healthcare system. And as I explained to my daughter the other night, this was always the concern. The concern was that you were going to blow out your healthcare system, your ability to deal with emergencies, like someone having a heart attack coming in with nowhere to go. People needing their routine treatments and not being able to get there. This was the concern. And in these places, they're struggling. Understand that the number of cases are going up in 39 states. And that's not a good, this is the summer. Remember, this is when it was supposed to go away. this is when historically, this kind of stuff stops. You don't get this in the summertime. This is something for the fall, which tells me we're in for quite a doozy of a fall. And it's so bad. And this is one of these things where, I said right at the very beginning when people weren't sure what it was, weren't sure how they were going to react, weren't sure if people were just overreacting. And I said, Major League Baseball, they temporarily suspended opening day. The NBA, in the middle of a game, said, time to go home. The NFL has, said they're doing away with a portion of their season. The NHL, these are major, major money-making operations. When they shut up shop, when they close the doors, that's when you know it's serious. That's when you know, maybe I should pay attention to this. When the moneyed interests are going, maybe we should not do some things. Maybe, maybe it's a bad idea. And that's when I kind of really started taking, considerable note. I mean, I had taken note before, but when that stuff started happening, I go, wow, this is something once in a lifetime, or once, in a century. I now see, and this is one of those moments where you go, now it's serious. Now it's real serious. This second wave of the first wave is serious, because evidently Donald Trump today canceled the RNC portion, the RNC's Jacksonville portion. Evidently they had some health concerns. And as I said from the start, when he said, we're going to move from North Carolina, we're going to Florida, I'm going, that's a bad idea. You're going to regret that. Especially when you start talking about getting a whole bunch of old white people in a room. Most of those people are nursing home age. You don't want your whole party infected, unless maybe you do. But evidently he made the announcement from the White House briefing room. Not sure what they're going to do yet. They haven't really gotten into that. They're scrambling. They were spending all their time trying to have their big display and their big shindig in Jacksonville. Now nothing. Because understand, these conventions take years to put together. They're working on this stuff 2 years in advance. And so to say that, stop on a dime and say, well, we're leaving from Charlotte, we're going to Jacksonville, that is a logistical nightmare. So you had all these people down there working, of which some of them have actually gotten the virus, from some of the reports that I've seen. And now they're saying, no, maybe this is a bad idea. So again, you had Trump yesterday saying that things are probably going to get worse. And what that means is, oh my God, things are going to get really worse. And now this should be the telltale sign that things are going to get worse, and in perfect Trumpian fashion. As I said from the beginning, when he said, now we're going to start wearing masks, that, this was going to be, masks are good. We like masks. We've got tremendous masks. We just love our masks. We've got the best masks. People call all the time, say, you've got the greatest masks. Expect that. It's coming. But yesterday, Kellyanne Conway basically threw all of the Republican governors, all the Southern governors, under the bus. And this is what Trump does. This is the Trumpian model. Because if you remember, back in April, in fact, it was April 13th, that Trump was very clear about what his views on opening up the country were. He had tweeted out that, and I'll read the two tweets directly. He said, I'm not going to do it in the Trump voice, for the purpose of creating conflict and confusion, some in the fake news media are saying that the governor's decision to open up the state, that it's the governor's decision to open up the state, that it's not the president of the United States and the federal government. Let it be fully understood that that is incorrect. He said, it is the decision of the president, and for many good reasons. With that being said, Donald tweets, the administration and I are working closely with the governors and will continue. A decision by me in conjunction with the governors and input from others will be made shortly. So on April 13th, he's telling us, I'm the decider guy. I'm the guy who tells you when you get to open up. You don't do anything without me. So Brian Kemp in Georgia, he's getting the word. Things are good. We're going to open up. Immediately, Trump throws him under the bus. Immediately. Yesterday, you had Kellyanne Conway going out there saying, well, you know, it's a false rumor that Donald Trump said what I just read. It's not true. He always said that the states would be in charge of reopening. It wasn't going to be his decision. And you go, but Kellyanne, did you not read his Twitter account? Are you not one of his followers? Don't you get the daily briefing from Twitter? And the answer is she doesn't care. She's the modern day Winston Smith. She's going to write and say and do whatever she needs to do to make dear leader happy. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you can look someone in the eye and flat out lie to them. She was very clear. She said some states, this was her statement from the press briefing on the 22nd. Some states blew through our gated criteria, blew through our phases, and they opened up some of the industries a little too quickly, like bars. And I'm personally a loud voice in those task force meetings to say, look, are we going to open up bars or schools in 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 months? She says, I think as a nation, we probably want to open both, but as a nation, there are many people who just need the certainty that of their kids going back to school full time and they're learning from home, etc. She says, so remember the governors wanted complete latitude over when they would open their states. They pushed back heavily, handsomely, Republicans and Democrats, when it was falsely rumored that the president was going to be in charge of opening the states. He's a federalist. He believes in states' rights. I can't. How can she say that statement with a straight face? He believes in states' rights while he's sending federal troops, federal agents into Chicago, into Portland, going to send them into Milwaukee and Albuquerque. How can she possibly, with anything close to a straight face, say that Donald Trump is a federalist and he believes in states' rights? It's really quite amazing to me. And when I read that, it reminded me of election night 2016. And I've talked about this before. I was at the Democratic Party headquarters here in my town, and there was a guy he's a political operative. You know, he's soulless, but tends to lean conservative. But he was running the campaign of one of the Democrats. Because understand, in the political gamesmanship world, they're soulless. All they see is the game. Campaigns are about strategy. Campaigns, it's like a chess match. It's you find your message, you find your things, and you go with that. No core beliefs, no soul, no ideology, none of that. But he was very clear, and he was right. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He looked at me and he said, it's going to be fun watching liberals who want government to do things for them become states' rights advocates once Trump starts doing the things that conservatives want him to do. And that stuck with me this entire time because he's right. If you look at what conservatives are doing, it's this kind of authoritarian, fascist kind of rule where there's not a second thought about sending in the Department of Homeland Security or the FBI or the CIA or who knows, or mercenaries for all we know. The Border Patrol in Portland. But I remember him, and it's one of those things that I'll tell you, it's a scary, scary moment. We got lots to get to today. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti is going to be here to share some thoughts on what happens in Chicago if and when they send the federal who knows what, name the alphabet soup, what he thinks should happen. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day 9,000 copper miners in the Keweenaw region of Upper Peninsula, Michigan, went out on strike. Organized by the Western Federation of Miners, the strike raged on for over 8 months, witnessing devastating tragedy in a Christmas Day fire and ending in bitter defeat. The strike was waged over basic issues like the 8-hour day, higher wages, mine safety, and union recognition. But strikers were also fed up with the company's paternalism and intrusion into their personal lives. They also worried for their jobs with the introduction of labor-saving machinery. The Western Federation of Miners succeeded early on in shutting down the mines, but the copper barons wouldn't budge. By August, many mines reopened with scab labor. Later that month, deputies shot 2 strikers dead and wounded 2 others as they returned home from attempting to collect strike benefits. The incident became known as the Seaborville Massacre. Striking miners were absolutely devastated when on Christmas Day, 73, mostly children, were trampled to death during a Christmas party and benefit at the Italian Hall in Calumet. Witnesses remembered seeing a man with a Citizens Alliance button just moments before someone yelled fire that caused the stampede. Soon after the Italian Hall disaster, Western Federation of Miner President Charles Moyer was shot by a Citizens Alliance mob, then loaded, bleeding, onto a train bound for Chicago. By April, the union was broke, the strike was broken, and the miners resolved to return to work. Bosses would only rehire strikers once they had turned in their union cards. The copper mines in the region would finally be organized some 30 years later in a campaign led by Mine Mill during the years 1939 to 1943. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers said today that he does not support in any way, shape, or form Trump sending in federal agents to his city there in Milwaukee. You saw Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner actually go as far as saying that anyone, including federal law enforcement, who unlawfully assaults and kidnaps people will face criminal charges from his office. And this is what I was asking, if the states don't want them there and the cities don't want them there, and you have these federal officers arresting people on the streets, does this then become one of these moments where you're pitting them against one another? And is this a good thing? Here to share some thoughts on Trump's decision to send in whatever alphabet soup tactical units they've got. I've asked Renato Mariotti to come talk with us. He's a former federal prosecutor and host of the On Topic podcast. Renato, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, anytime.
So I guess they're going to be tactical units from Homeland Security, the Border Patrol, or who knows what coming to your city.
Yeah, it is something that people are understandably concerned about because, frankly, we have seen what they've done in other cities. We've seen these sort of unmarked, law enforcement units making arrests. We learned today, of course, now the Inspector General is opening up investigation into that matter. Now, we're told, so reportedly, it's going to be different here in Chicago. These units are just going to be working with federal law enforcement to investigate crimes that already had been under investigation. But I think people are understandably concerned about it.
No, I mean, because the first thing I'm thinking of is, has this happened before, where you basically send in these attack squads, like we saw in Portland?
What happened in Portland, honestly, I've not seen that happen before, and it's really not proper. I mean, the way that if for example, a state or locality is having trouble policing on its own, actually the military is what is used by federal authorities. Like, for example, when when President Eisenhower sent in troops, the 101st Airborne, when rights weren't being protected in Little Rock. But using unmarked sort of unidentified federal law enforcement to go beyond merely enforcing federal laws, but actually to be sort of performing street policing. Very, very unprecedented, very concerning. Obviously, the actions of some of those officers are very concerning. And we're all crossing our fingers here that that's not what's going to happen in Chicago.
No, because I look at it, and the sad reality is, by having them there, all they did was escalate things. That this kind of show of force, and I know a lot of people like to think that if we just go in there with an iron fist, people are going to jump into line. That's not what happens.
Yeah, absolutely not. Frankly, I think all of us have seen these images of a lot of courageous women, for example, in Portland, who have been enduring tear gas attacks and much worse at the hands of federal law enforcement. And I think, the broader concern people have is, why are some of these law enforcement unidentified? And we expect that law enforcement officers are identifying themselves, and they're really, the purpose of federal law enforcement is to be enforcing federal law, not to have this sort of unaccountable force, private force that the president can order to essentially, in this case, I think potentially create a political issue for him during an election year.
Yeah, and so do you think sending them these different organizations, whoever they are, because I don't see a reason for the Border Patrol to be in Chicago, enforcing Illinois state law. I don't quite get it, but do you see this as that?
Let's put it this way: I'm suspicious of everything the Trump administration does. And this is obviously political, and it was obviously done by Trump. He uses my city of Chicago as a trope and a boogeyman in his political ads, right? We're this evil liberal city that is essentially a boogeyman. The reality is, we've had violence in Chicago for a long time. There's violent crime. And it's really caused by all these root causes: economic inequality, a lot of structural issues, and a lot of difficult issues and joblessness and other pervasive problems in these neighborhoods that you can't solve with 100 federal officers. We love resources. We love getting federal resources here, and in other years and other contexts, we've asked for them. But what this smacks of to me is like an election year move, and it's a show, and I just hope it doesn't turn into something like Portland.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But here's the thing. I look at, as you said, using Chicago during an election year, because this is something he had talked about doing, back during the election, that they were going to do this to Chicago, because your city is, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and you can't deny that it doesn't happen. But look, I've been to Chicago a number of times. I've never had any problems. I guess what I'm getting at is, the message that the administration and conservatives have thrown at me for years is that Chicago's this violent city, especially in those neighborhoods. So is this not on a certain level, just base race baiting?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Realistically, first of all, Chicago is not per capita the most violent city, or even close to the most violent city in the United States, first of all. But second of all, as you point out, almost all of the violence is in certain areas of the city. So if you carved out the downtown and the northern part of the city and had that secede, right, for the rest of the city of Chicago, it would probably be the safest city in the United States. I mean, if you look at the map, there's almost no shootings and murders in this large, rich, largely white part of the city. And the reality is, Chicago is segregated, and there's violence in certain communities, and the causes of that violence, sure, racism is part of that, economic and structural inequality is part of that, joblessness is part of it. There's all sorts of complicated things that are frankly beyond my the ability to comprehend them, forces beyond my expertise. But nonetheless, 100 people or 1,000 people from the federal government are not going to solve these large problems. And we do need to if we had a president who cared about about those communities and wanted to restore hope to those communities and wanted to tackle those problems, I'd applaud it. But what we instead have is a president who's trying to use those communities in my city as essentially a prop. And really, as you point out, it's really putting himself against an African-American female mayor and against those, largely minority communities.
Yeah, but it's not surprising that they're going after big Democratic cities. I mean, Milwaukee is on the list. There's talk of Baltimore. There's talk of New York. There's talk of Cleveland. All of these cities that have large minority populations and a lot of poverty. I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of poverty in those areas. That if you really wanted to do something, how about addressing that? Which none of that is in this. I did want to ask you about Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner's statement today that potentially they would start arresting federal law enforcement officers. Is that possible?
It's certainly possible, but it would be very highly problematic. And I think, Krasner, I think, is partly trying to make a statement and potentially raise the costs and raise the potential problems that would be caused for federal law enforcement. So I think certainly under state law, he could argue that they're acting without authority. But I don't think that's a wise move on his part necessarily. But there are better ways of doing it. I think it's more or less posturing. But I think he's trying to make a point, which is he thinks that the actions that they're taking are lawless. Certainly, there's a lot of concern about what they're doing in Portland. I'm less concerned about what they say they're going to be doing in Chicago. But I with the Trump administration, I never take them at their word.
Yeah, as I said yesterday on the program, it's my view that this is setting up an environment where they're going to send in these folks who, in their tactical gear and in their war paraphernalia, and be standing out in front of polling places in poverty communities all across this country. That may sound a little conspiratorial, but we've seen instances where they send out, people who are in unmarked cars looking like policemen too. So this, to me, is just that next step towards voter intimidation.
Well, I will tell you, if that happens, that would be a violation of the rights of those communities to vote. It could potentially be a violation also of just their equal protection under the laws. I certainly hope nothing like that happens. What I'm fearful with Trump is his consolidation of power in himself personally. He's just been destroying and trying to undermine all these institutions that serve as a check on the president's power, from the free press to Congress and to our court system. And here he's creating this law enforcement force that is loyal only to him because, of course, federalism in our states and cities are a check on the federal government as well. So it's very alarming, the centralized power that he is trying to gain for himself. And I think it just makes all of us realize how hard we have to work this year to ensure that he's defeated.
Yeah, but here's the thing: even if he is defeated, will he go? And as you've said, he's consolidating power. What mechanism throws him out?
Yeah, well, I have to hope that that if he is defeated in the election this November, that all of us will come together. I mean, one thing that was a little hopeful for me is when he had that staging with the military when he walked to the church. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs apologized for his role in that, and there was a lot of people, former military leaders, who are speaking up about the need for the military to be apolitical, and so it is my hope that there is still enough of a tradition in this country of the peaceful transition of power and of the control of the voters through the ballot box, that is going to have that peaceful transition of power. But if not, obviously, our country and our freedoms are at stake.
But here's the thing: you said a moment ago that he's consolidating power into the hands of people loyal to him. And I look at the acting Homeland Security chief, and I say acting because none of these people seem to go through the confirmation process.
Right.
Who says he doesn't need the permission of cities to send in anything? He can do what he wants, and he said they're not backing up. Does this not make us, maybe go back and look at what we did with Homeland Security? Maybe look at what kind of powers the president has and reevaluate those?
Well, I do think for all of us who lived through the Bush years, the George W. Bush years, we saw the seeds of some of this, right? We've seen the seeds of Trumpism in George W. Bush, the creation of Homeland Security, obviously the Patriot Act. We also have, of course, for example, this whole idea of attacking truth, right, which is kind of core to how Trump has been gaining power. Rove was the one who laughed at the reality-based community and talked about how he created his own reality. So the seeds of a lot of this were planted then. It was interesting to see Tom Ridge the first Homeland Security Secretary under Bush, decrying what Trump is doing, and now he was dismissed today by Trump as a never Trumper. So yeah, I do think we need to take a look at this, and I think we frankly need to do a better job. Congress needs to do a better job of changing the laws regarding the use of the military and of federal law enforcement in the states to enforce laws there.
Yeah, I just talked about a story of that from the election night in 2016, where a political operative that I know told me it was going to be fun watching liberals become states' rights advocates. And this is what he was talking about. He foresaw this, on election night in 2016, that this kind of thing was going to happen. And is that a fair assessment? Because there are a lot of liberals who want the federal government to act and to intervene. Is this one of those examples?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think it's fair to say that folks on the left, progressives, have started to realize, okay, it's not so bad that we have for example, state's attorney general, right, that can file suits against the federal government when the citizens of those states are having their rights trampled on and so forth. Look, one thing I think this has taught all of us is we need to have checks and balances in our government. And frankly, we need more of them built into our government to ensure that we don't have a runaway tyrant that potentially is president. So while certainly we want government to take an active role in solving these problems, as we talked about earlier, for example, these difficult problems of inequality and other things, we also want to make sure that we have a government that is kept in check and that we have checks and balances to ensure that we don't have a tyrant taking over our government either.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So last question I've got for you, what are you paying attention to? What do you suggest people watch? Because, as you said, you're hoping that the people they send into Chicago aren't going to be the kind that they send into Portland. I still think anywhere there's a protest, you're going to still see these kind of attack units. But what should people be paying attention to?
What I'm most concerned about, Rick, is an issue you touched on, which is voting and how we're going to vote this November. I'm very concerned about how many states are not, enabling people to vote properly, and I'm concerned about the, voter suppression and efforts to make sure that voters don't have ballots available to them where they can vote in a way that's safe. So I'm most concerned about that because I am at the point now where I think that the only real check on Trump between now and November is going to be at that ballot box, and we need to make sure that ballot box is fair and free.
Yeah, because it's certainly not going to be the Republican Party. They have shown no spine in holding him accountable.
Absolutely not, and I think a lot of Democratic lawmakers have just, they tried to impeach Trump, and they weren't able to remove him, and I think they're at this point, the Trump administration has done an effective job of stonewalling and delaying. So we need this change to happen in November.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Renato, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Always great talking with you.
Anytime. Have a good one.
Good stuff. Our good friend Renato Mariotti. Make sure you check out his podcast, On Topic. Fantastic legal podcast, one of the ones that I listen to quite often. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day that a mob began an attack on Chinese workers in San Francisco that killed 4 people. During the mid-1870s, a depression swept across the nation. White workers from the East Coast headed west, many to San Francisco, hoping to find a job. Skilled Chinese workers who had completed their labor on the Transcontinental Railroad also came to the city. There, the Chinese laborers found work in trades like cigar making and also open laundries. Resentment against the Chinese workers grew in the city's white working class. In the summer of 1877, workers on the East Coast railroads walked off their jobs after their wages were cut repeatedly. A wave of labor militancy washed over the nation. Historians often refer to that summer as the Great Upheaval, a time where capital and labor literally battled in the streets. In San Francisco, the Workingmen's Association, a socialist workers' organization, called for a rally in front of City Hall. The meeting began with speeches against the titans of capital. But soon, a group of angry workers began to demand speakers, quote, talk about the Chinese. A mob stormed off to terrorize Chinese residents. They burned 20 Chinese laundries. After the violence ended the next day, the anti-Chinese rhetoric continued. An Irish-born freight handler by the name of Dennis Kearney became the vocal leader of the call that the Chinese must go. Adherence to the anti-Chinese cause came to be known as Kearneyism. The backlash against Chinese workers spread beyond California. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Solidarity of workers had fallen to racism. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've been talking about the fall and school reopening, and we've already decided our kids are going to stay home for a couple of months until we see how this all shakes out. The school district, I still don't think they've come up with an absolute plan yet where we're at on how they're going to handle this. Because I think, look, a lot of people are in wait-and-see mode, waiting to see if the explosion that everyone is expecting to happen happens, how bad it is. And I think, caution is really the position of the day. So I was happy to see that in Philadelphia, the union that represents the principals is saying, hey, maybe we should do the online distance learning for the first couple of months and let's see how it goes out. That's why I've asked the president of Teamsters Local 502, the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators, Dr. Robin Cooper, to come talk with us. Dr. Cooper, thanks for taking time for us. Did I lose her?
Oh.
All right. Thanks for taking time for us, Doctor.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, good on you guys, as I said from the beginning, good on you guys for calling for the sanity, I think, and saying, hey, the kids need to stay home for the first couple of months.
Well, right now, tonight, we have approximately 150 speakers, and we are halfway through the school board meeting. Not one has said that students should return to school, not one, out of almost 150 speakers.
I said from the beginning, the reality is if anybody's had a child one kid came to class with head lice, and everybody got it. If you've watched how that has spread through the classroom, and that's just a minor nuisance, imagine what an airborne pathogen, this coronavirus would do to a classroom and ultimately to families.
And that's exactly right. We're saying just let's take a wait and see approach. We're not saying let's not educate. We're saying let's do a phased in approach. We think it's too much, too fast, too soon.
Now, everyone's going to bring up that, well, you know what, we need to get kids back into school because parents need somewhere for the kids to go to during the day while they're at work. Kids need the socialization. It's much harder on them to be isolated at home. What response do you give to that?
So basically, we're looking for children to socialize, to become super spreaders and give the disease to or the virus to, family members. So let's say that the children, they don't readily get it. I don't believe that because there's not enough information out there for us to come to that conclusion. But let's say it's so. Let's say they're carriers. So, if they live with people of a vulnerable age or vulnerable symptoms, then we still are spreading and we're going to see an uptick in the virus anyway. And just looking at some of the research, there were camps that were open around the country. There was one camp where 84 people tested positive. Well, we really just started the summer. We're in the middle of the summer and already 84 people. So if you're at summer camp and you're socializing, can you imagine if you're in school all day?
Yep. And how can you do the social distancing, and how are you going to get kids to wear masks, and how are you going to get them, look, kids are going to be kids. They're going to be climbing over each other. There's going to be, all kinds of stuff going on. It would be really a logistical nightmare for teachers, especially in school districts that have, enormous class sizes to begin with, like a place like Philadelphia.
It's enormous class sizes. It's not enough PPE. Currently, the plan that our district has called for says that each adult will get one mask per year, not per week, per year. So there's not enough PPE. You're stating right off the bat that you cannot give the adults the equipment that they need, but you're in essence asking us to come and teach children to death. And I really need folks to understand that. So we're here for children. We want to be here for children. We want to do our job, but you can't say if you're not willing to die, you're not a good educator.
Right. No, that's an excellent point.
You can't say that.
So I'm with you 100%. I think it's ridiculous that we're even considering sending our kids back into this environment. So the questions then become, and this is what my wife and I are dealing with. How are we going to deal with when our kids have to go back to school? What are you asking for? How are we going to make sure that our kids get what they need? Because I'll tell you, I love our kids' teachers. They did the best that they could given the situation that they were under for the last couple of months of the last year. But it wasn't really all that beneficial. How do we make sure that the next couple of months actually, resembles something of a learning environment?
Well, I think you always have to have a plan B. While we knew that this could be one of the options, we should have been working with educators to enhance their virtual learning, their virtual teaching. And then that way, if children were home, then we're better equipped to handle the virtual needs of our children. But also, we really need to call on some of our social agencies to help parents, because we're not saying that there is not a problem because parents have to work, but I need you to really think about what you're saying. You're saying that, in essence, we're going to put children in schools because parents have to work. So it's not where, all day long, what teachers will be relegated to is babysitting and keeping them socially distanced from each other. Right. So where is the socialization coming in? So how are all these plans, so in a classroom, our plan says you can have up to 25 students in a classroom. So where's the social distancing when we currently have 30 in a classroom? So you're saying less 5 and we're socially distancing at 6 feet apart?
Yeah,
it's not feasible.
That doesn't sound possible. And, judging from, the teachers I've talked to in the Philadelphia school district and other districts across the state, the quarters are usually cramped. The classrooms have a whole bunch of other problems beyond this. So there's kind of a nightmare.
And we're fighting asbestos in a number of our schools.
Right.
We have issues where the windows don't open. We have ventilation systems that are poor. So all of these contributing factors. And yes, we were given a framework. Yes, there were committees, there were groups. But the piece is, when you raise these questions, they fall on deaf ears. And the whole thing is, well, children need to be in school. Children need to be learning. And I agree. But Rick, I would rather have my child miss a couple of months, even if it's a year. I would rather have my child with a gap in learning than not have a child at all, or to have a child that's still here but contributed to passing the virus on to someone else in my family who's more vulnerable. So we're talking about education. But if this virus wipes out somebody in your family, was it worth it? Because I can fill the gap in learning. I can do that, but I can't fill a life, because once it's gone, it's gone.
What do you say to the person that goes, well, come on, aren't you being a bit extreme? This isn't that big of a deal.
And well, I want you to ask the 100,000 people who've already died. Ask their family members. Am I being extreme? I just don't think so. I just don't think we have enough information at hand. And again, in Philadelphia, we're not saying close the schools indefinitely. We're saying, go so many days without a new case. Go so many, let's say 30 days. Go 30 days without a new case or without anyone needing to be, I don't know, whatever the barometer is, but you can't see an uptick in cases and say, oh, we're moving back to red, but we're still going to open the schools. It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So then, as I said a moment ago, what does this look like? Because what happened over the last couple of months, wasn't acceptable in my view. I had hoped that the schools were doing, as you were saying, doing some upgrading of skills and giving new skills on how to do this, this virtual learning.
Well, I think a lot of times, especially where I am, we focus on plan A. There is no plan B. So we're focused on plan A. So my concern is, so let's say we definitely go virtual, all virtual, and, at the return of school. What have we done to ensure a better success rate with the virtual than when we started March 13th? That's critical, because you have a large number of parents who are not going to return their children because at this point they are thinking more rationally than the district, where the district is saying, get the kids back, get them back. We got to get them back. We have to get them back. But there's not a plan to do so. So if I'm the teacher with no class control, and the parent comes in and wants to know why does little Johnny have little Mikey's mask on, what do I say? Because I'm an educator.
No,
I'm not really equipped to handle all of the additional things that go along with keeping children safe.
Yeah, I mean, you're already in a situation where, you've got to be learning how to protect them from active shooters and now global pandemics. It's a hell of a job. But here's the other part, and I look at Philadelphia, and maybe this is just my view, and having spoken with so many teachers from Philadelphia, you've got a lot of challenges of poverty. And a lot of those and I'm sure there's the same challenges in my school district and in others, but maybe a little bit more in the Philadelphia area maybe families don't have internet access. How do you do virtual learning with a family that doesn't have a computer or doesn't have access to the internet?
And that was one of the things where we lost a lot of credibility in Philadelphia, because the school district's response to that was bring them in the parking lot of the school district. We have Wi-Fi. So there's not a systematic plan to get this done, and there's these quick answers, and nobody really vets out the answers. So parents have to actually become the professionals in place of the professionals, because when something doesn't sound right, you don't just listen to the other person because they're the professional. If it doesn't sound right, you have to follow what your mind is telling you in regards to safety for your child.
Yeah. Now, you're obviously representing the principals of these schools. What are you getting from the teachers associations and the teachers groups?
Right now, they are a part of the 150 on the line. There is no one in agreement. If nothing else, in Philadelphia, the labor leaders have come together. The labor leaders of the school district have come together and said this is not a good plan. And what we're hoping is that the leader of the school district really listens to the labor union leaders and say, this is not a good plan. We need to step back a little bit, bring some stakeholders to the table, and figure out a viable plan. And we recognize that nobody is really going to be happy, because we all want our kids in school, everybody. Administrators have kids too. Everybody wants their children back in school. But the caveat is at what cost?
No, I agree. Look,
I've
got two kids one's going first year into middle school, another one first year into high school. I don't want them to miss that experience. But sadly, they're going to, because we're just not going to put them in an environment that could make them sick and ultimately kill us or grandma.
And that's our concern.
That's it in a nutshell. So I guess one other question, because you guys still have the SRC there, right?
No, we have an appointed school board now. I believe that's in their second year or third year.
Okay, because I was going to ask, is there something Governor Wolf can do on this?
Well, we're really hoping so, because right now it appears, and this is an opinion. This is my opinion. It appears as if the school board, blindly follows the superintendent. So you can't even get a meeting across to the school board to really outline what some of the issues are that really, speak to some of the core problems, concerning some major issues across the district. We just firmly believe that we shouldn't be in this situation right now.
Right.
We can't stop the pandemic. You just can't. It happened. It is, it is what it is. It happened. But as far as really getting together key groups and hearing from them, you cannot only hear from one person. So if currently our school board listens and takes the side fully of the superintendent, no matter right, wrong, or indifferent, then we are in trouble.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, when the principal says stay home, I'm going to listen.
Principals in Philadelphia are saying stay home.
There you go. Dr. Cooper, I appreciate your time. Keep up the great fight. Good talking with you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Dr. Robin Cooper, president of Teamsters Local 502, the Commonwealth Association of School Administrators. Look, if she's saying stay home, I'm not going to not listen. But then again, we were going to keep our kids home anyway. Love to hear your thoughts. What are you doing this fall? Would you send your kids into this? Do you think it's not a big deal? Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear it. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1892. That was the day that Lithuanian-born anarchist Alexander Berkman attempted to shoot steel magnate Andrew Carnegie's second-in-command, Henry Clay Frick. Berkman wanted to avenge the Homestead Steel Massacre, in which 9 workers were killed. Berkman's lover, Emma Goldman, wrote in her autobiography, "Frick is the responsible factor in this crime." She went on to write that Berkman had told her, "I will kill Frick, and of course, I shall be condemned to death. I will die proudly in the assurance that I gave my life for the people, but I will die by my own hand. Never will I permit our enemies to kill us." Alexander Berkman went to Frick's office on July 21st, posing as a New York City hiring agency representative. When Berkman was told Frick could not see him, he left. He returned 2 days later. He burst into Frick's office and fired 2 shots at Frick's head. Several of Frick's associates were able to wrestle him to the ground. Still, Berkman managed to take out the sharpened steel file he was carrying and stabbed Frick twice. Despite all of this, Frick did not die. Berkman was in jail for 2 months awaiting trial. Alexander Berkman was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison. He served 14 years of his term before being released. Berkman wrote an account of his prison years titled Prison Memoirs of an Anarchist. In 1917, he and Emma Goldman were arrested and found guilty of violating the Espionage Act, and both were imprisoned for 2 years. In 1918, both were deported from the United States. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to clear up something I talked about a little bit earlier with Trump, maybe I gave Trump too much credit. Maybe this is my Van Jones moment. I didn't say he was being presidential. I said he had maybe a little bit of sense. Maybe I've given too much credit. Just kind of throwing that out there. I said that they are canceling the RNC event in Jacksonville. I had assumed that it was because nobody was going to show up. Honestly, my mindset was all of the people who were bailing on it because they don't want to get sick and die probably gave Trump the idea that there was going to be nobody there, that he would show up to a crowd like he did in Tulsa, where there were some people in the auditorium, but the overflow that they had, there were like 6 people mulling around. So he probably didn't want that embarrassment. And that was my mindset. Turns out, and thank you, I think it was Patricia for the response. that yeah, Patricia. Jacksonville, the citizens of Jacksonville filed a lawsuit against Trump and the RNC yesterday, according to Patricia. We never wanted them here. They never pay their bills. They had not paid the advance $33 million. And Sheriff Williams said no yesterday, as did our city council. So it looks like this was not a choice for Trump to make, and canceling it seemed like the only way to save face. And I didn't know about the city council saying no, but I know the mayor had said that they were going to enforce the mask thing. So that was kind of a slap in the face to Trump. But I like the part where she says they never pay their bills. They don't. Trump never pays his bills. So there you go. Maybe that's the rest of it. And maybe that's what prompted the announcement. Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate the information. Another bit of Trumpism. Evidently, Ben Carson over at HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, they evidently have done away with the fair housing rule that had been in place since 2015. It was titled "Furthering Fair Housing Rule," affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. The idea was to give people choice and do all of this kind of policy making to get more communities to have more diversity and give people with these Section 8 vouchers and such to be able to move into better neighborhoods. And look, I remember when I was a kid, how we got out of the projects was because my mother, we qualified to get a Section 8 housing voucher, and we got to move into a really good, solid working class neighborhood. That was safe. That didn't have to worry about being robbed every day. We got robbed once, but that was by the landlord. But that's a whole nother story. But because of this, we got to move, and I'm all in favor of this. If it gives people the opportunity to move out of deplorable conditions and seek a better life, I'm in favor of it. What Trump has now done is completely undone that. And they are now moving towards, instead of the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule that Obama put forth, they are moving forward on preserving community and neighborhood choice. This is there. Now stop and think about this. I was a poor white kid, grew up in the ghetto. We got this voucher, got out of the projects, and moved to a good neighborhood. Under Trump's thing, if I'm getting this right, we might not be able to have moved. Especially if we were, a person of color. And that's really what this is about, the whole preserving your neighborhood and preserving your community. It's about keeping those people out. And I find it interesting that it's Ben Carson doing it. Now Ben Carson likes to say he lived near the projects because I guess they lived somewhere around the corner, but he didn't. So it's just really, really sickening. I mean, if you stop and think about it, everything that this administration has done has been to move this country backward to a place that, I guess for some, it was great. If you were rich and white, it was great. If you're a poor working class slub like most of the people I know, life got really hard. And it's getting there. So they have plenty of time to do this. They have plenty of time to move forward on destroying everything they can, but not much in the way of how do we fix things? How do we make people's lives better? I'm a person who believes our government should be working to make things better, not worse. We should be moving forward, not backward. We should be expanding hope and opportunity, not destroying it. Interesting times in which we live. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Sarah Burris is going to be here to share some of the top news of the day from the good folks over at Raw Story. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
During today's COVID-19 crisis, the PR departments of every brand name corporation are running slick ads nobly proclaiming, "We're all in this together." But simultaneously, the lobbying departments of those corporations are ignobly using the public's focus on the health crisis as cover for selfishly grabbing government favors. One of the grabbiest special interests are well-off corporate and parochial private schools, where students from some of America's wealthiest families get their education. For years, these private entities have been lobbying relentlessly to make taxpayers finance their schools, even though they usually have an ideological or religious curriculum, and some even share the extremist view that public schools should be eliminated. That extremist nook is where Betsy DeVos resides. She's a multi-billionaire heiress and longtime funder of far right-wing causes. Chosen by Trump to run America's education department, she's been trying to run our schools straight into private hands, but with little success. Then, along came the COVID federal relief package, including funds to help meet the education needs of low-income students in hard-hit public schools. "Hallelujah," shouted DeVos, grabbing the coronavirus as a way to advance her agenda. In May, she issued an edict requiring local public school districts to divert millions of the relief dollars from their disadvantaged students, forcing them to share their allotment with even the richest private schools. Astonishingly, Trump's haughty education secretary rationalized her directive as a matter of economic fairness, piously informing locals that they must not discriminate against the rich. This is Jim Hightower saying, luckily, DeVos's share with the rich dictum does not have the force of law, and public schools are fighting back. For information, go to National Coalition for Public Education at ncpecoalition.org.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently Michael Cohen's getting back out. He was out. They rammed him back in. Evidently he's going to get out again. And the judge found that it was retaliation for his book. Who knew? Other than, well, everybody. It's just not surprising. Again, another tell-all. I hope he makes. I don't think he's going to make what Mary Trump made, but I think he'll get a couple of bucks, help him make it through the rest of his time. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on that and everything else we can bang through. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story, to come and fill us in on all of the things that we are missing and all of the fun and hilarity that is the Trump administration. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you taking time. So what do you think of, Cohen out, Cohen in, Cohen back out?
Well, I think he knew that this is really retaliation. That was the reason that they filed the lawsuit, is they were just like, this is complete BS. And, that's how he ended up getting out. And the quotes from the judge, and I mean, it was very, very obvious that this was unconstitutional. And I am frankly floored. I know that I shouldn't be, but I am still constantly surprised by the White House trying to get away with stuff like this. And thankfully it didn't work, but now Michael Cohen can go home and be in prison at home and order whatever takeout delivery he wants and write his tell-all book.
Yeah, see, I'm against people getting out like that. I got to tell you, if you're convicted, you go to jail. Because if it were me, I'm not getting out. They're not letting me out.
Well, if you're black, you're not getting out either, right?
That's
the other thing that, and I think that we've actually finally started to see that in California, especially like people of color who are nonviolent, pot smokers from 12 years ago, who it was their third strike. They're finally starting to let people out for BS crimes like that. So nice to hear that it's maybe starting to somewhat equalize someday.
Maybe someday it will happen. Who knows? And I think the virus is brought on some of this as well. I mean, some of the prisons are going, but we don't know what to do. We don't want to get an outbreak because look, you shouldn't get a death sentence for smoking pot.
Yeah, there's a women's prison in Houston, Texas, in particular. I think it's like all 800 inmates tested positive for COVID, and in that specific county, they had 814 positive cases.
Wow!
So they're all in the prison. Yeah. So that's
now, were they all in prison before they got it, or did they find those people and put them all in prison?
they have been in prison, and they got it.
So here's because just in the last hour we were talking about sending kids back to school. So this is a perfect little test. Say if you send your kids back to school, we could be like the women's prison in Texas.
Well, I think a great example is all of the camps that kids are going to. All the summer camps. There was a whole group of summer camps in Missouri where kids went to that, and a ton of kids ended up with COVID. So I think that is a really good representation of, it turns out we actually can't do this. I've made comments about, that I don't think that if an adult human can't go to Walmart for less than an hour and not pitch a complete tantrum, I wonder how we're going to make a kindergartner wear a mask for 8 hours.
Exactly.
And much less 20 of them, right?
Heck, 20, 30. I mean, they pack these kids into a classroom. No, you're absolutely right. My thing has been, one kid in the class gets head lice and everybody's got it. And that's a mild nuisance.
Or pink eye.
Another one.
Yeah. And I mean, we all understand, like, the younger the child, the harder it's going to be to be able to get them to do stuff. But at the same time, I mean, you got to admit, like, half of these kids are a hell of a lot more mature than the Walmart shoppers throwing a tantrum about the mask.
Yeah.
So there is that. But
there is that. So have there been many other fun stories? I mean, the woman in Verizon who dropped trow in the middle of the floor there, that was probably one of my favorites. Because that one's, that's just a little nuisance. The guy getting shot in the back of the head because he wouldn't let somebody in, or the guy who got stabbed. There's no fun in that. But the crazy woman who, I don't know, how does that happen? How do you get it between your ears that I'm going to throw a tantrum and I'm just going to drop my drawers and go right here?
I assume that it's wine related. I could be wrong. But when I see somebody who is in a Verizon store who just decides to pull their pants down, the first thing I think is, was that box of wine red or white?
You think wine does that, though?
For people dropping their drawers.
Okay.
And I mean, I think there's a level of crazy, right? There's people who obviously should be on some anti-anxiety drugs who, have very short fuses.
I got
you. And so, add that plus a couple of glasses of wine and a late night trip to Walmart, and somebody says, something's slightly wrong, and all of a sudden Karen is just going off the deep end.
Yeah.
And
Karen the cat lady's just marking her territory.
Yeah.
Got to do what you got to do. Let's move along. Evidently, the White House cafeteria is shut down because someone got it. Where are they going to now eat? Is Donald going to send out for McDonald's and KFC and all them for them? Are they making some accommodations for the staffers at the White House?
I doubt it. I mean, there are places around there. There's a couple of coffee shops and sandwich places. I haven't been in Washington for a while. I came home in April, and so I'm not sure what is opening and what is not. I don't know where the White House perimeter is now because, they advanced it out so much. And I was really worried that my favorite restaurant that's by the White House was going to get included inside the perimeter. And it's like, no, they have really good pie. Oh, man, it's the best pie ever. So I was just like, no, don't take my pie place away. So, I mean, there are places that they can go, but, these are not like the Ivankas and the Donald Trumps that are going.
This is the people who clean and polish and do all the other stuff.
It's the secretaries, it's the, not like Ben Carson's secretary. These are the assistants, the aides, the deputy's deputy of deputying.
The poorly paid people.
Still paid about as much as I make. So it depends. That like super low level staffer who's like the kid that's responsible for posting stuff for Donald Trump on Twitter, right? That guy's probably isn't paid very much. But yeah, I mean, these are folks who, I guess now they're going to have to bring their own PB&J and
brown bagging it.
Yeah.
There you go. I wanted to ask you about the cognitive test that Trump took. Did he remember the name of it ever?
No. Like, that's the best part. Like, the dude took a memory exam and he can't even remember what the damn exam is called. It's just like, no. Bless his heart, right? Like, that's a bless your heart if I ever have seen one.
So, but I think everybody ran to take that Montreal cognitive test to see, hey, can I pass it? And I think most people found out that it wasn't as hard as he said it was.
Yeah, it's not hard at all. And what's interesting is that he really kind of, it's like he keeps bringing it up over and over again. He doesn't really realize that people can look this up online and they can see what the questions are, and that identifying an elephant is actually not that hard. The tests like this, though, are really supposed to be given over like several times over the years to kind of chart how someone is doing over time. If you are doing a true mental evaluation, what we did with my grandfather when we were trying to figure out if he had Alzheimer's or dementia, there are different ways that you can tell what type of dementia that they had. And so we spent the whole day at this doctor's office. She wanted to see MRIs. She did interviews with us, talking about things that we've noticed about him. It was not asking man, woman, or person, woman, man, camera, TV. I think that was what it was. It was not questions like that. It was much more complex. And things that didn't have anything to do with each other. Some were 2-word things instead of man. It was like frozen pineapple, something that was a description, an adjective in front of the noun. And so I think that really looks into the short-term memory, which they say with Alzheimer's is the first thing really to go. So if somebody tells you something and you forget it pretty quickly after having like a 2-second conversation, then your short-term memory really sucks. And so it's like, okay, is that dementia or is that Alzheimer's? And that's when it takes, much deeper investigating from actual mental health professionals. And that's the other piece of this is it was Ronnie Jackson who gave him the exam 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And
the question I had,
and
the question when that came up was Ronnie Jackson drunk? Obviously the first question. No.
I don't know. That's a good question.
That's kind of what drummed him out. He had that little drinking problem.
Well, that and the fact that he was handing out pills to people without actually doing legitimate exams of them, and and that the thing is he was doing that in the Obama administration because I knew people who were like, yeah, hit me and give me an Ambien, and he'd basically dole out little baggies of one pill. For people traveling overseas who
Right.
had to sleep on a plane so, and which I get it, like for people who work in the White House, you don't have time to, and try and get into a doctor's office immediately in Washington. That's not going to happen. So I get why.
Sure, you need a connection.
I get why that exists. But most of the time when you have a legit doctor there, they keep records. They do. It's like having a doctor's office there. It's not somebody who's just a pill popper, right? Or a pill pusher. And the thing that I would say about the exam for Trump is that he's not equipped to really give that exam. He's a physician. He's not a professional mental health expert who is, has a vast array of knowledge on disorders, degenerative brain disorders. And so, Trump has been sort of baiting Joe Biden into taking this test. And I kind of want to say, well, why don't we just do this on television? And why don't we do it with a legitimate mental health professional who gives these exams all the time, who neither of them know, is completely independent, and let's let the world watch and see which one of them is completely like, woohoo, bye-bye.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
So,
You know, is this the level now at which we've decided we're going to pick a president by who can pass a cognitive test on TV? I mean, really, I love Joe Biden, but the reality is is this now where the conversation is? I can tell a rhinoceros and you can't.
I think that's the major question is, can this be a legitimate questionnaire, not that, other one? And I think too, what I'd love to see, we've talked about this before, that I would love to see a debate that has all of the citizenship questions, and you have to like write it on a marker board and then show what your answer is. I think that it is not unreasonable for Americans to ask for these kinds of tests if you're talking about somebody who has the nuclear codes. And it was kind of this idea before where I thought, surely not. Like in the United States, we as a country together can band together to make sure that we're not electing somebody who is 3 sheets from the wind, has dropped their brain in between the cushions of the couch or left it in their gold toilet. And, I don't think any of us really expected that Trump could ever really happen. And now, as we hopefully are getting rid of him, we really need to have a conversation about, all right, what laws and requirements do we need to put in place? Things that presidents did because it was the right thing to do, but it never was written down as a policy or a law. Ethics rules and all of that stuff. Like that needs to be an actual law now.
Yeah, but isn't that what having Congress is for? I mean, isn't this where having a functional House and Senate to hold the executive branch accountable? Isn't that what this is for? And the sad reality is Trump and his cabal have overtaken any bit of sanity in the Republican Party, and now it's basically just a death cult.
Yeah, and that's exactly why people need to vote for Democrats in the U.S. Senate. I think people are voting for Democrats in the House already. We're not going to lose any seats. Well, I don't think we'll lose very many seats. I worry about the Oklahoma 5th. So if you're looking to find a Democrat who is probably the most endangered, I think it would be the Oklahoma 5th. But for the most part, I think we'll even pick up seats this year. There are a lot of Republicans who are incredibly corrupt and have done some sketchy things. And I think a bunch of those guys will get kicked out. The Senate is a horse of a different color. If we really honestly want to make dramatic changes that fix a lot of this stuff, I think the only way that you're going to get to happen is with a Democratic Congress and Senate. And we really do just have 2 years to make everything happen as fast as possible.
No, you need that 60 vote majority in the Senate and keep what you've got in the House. And you need to go through and aggressively move on some really progressive, forward-looking legislation and move things forward. Because look, these last 3.5 years have just been horrible. And understand the Republicans aren't going to do anything to help. And I think that is shown today by the fact that we still don't have a stimulus package, and that they've just punted this into next week, and still talking about, maybe we cut the $600 down to $100. Maybe we don't have it at all. Maybe we cut the $1,200 check to people under only $40,000. I don't know where they pull this stuff out of, but it's all about how do we not actually help.
Yeah, and the Democrats passed the stimulus, the phase 4 stimulus in May, because they realized this is not going to end. We're not going to have a vaccine until, if we're very, very lucky at the end of the year, but let's be realistic, it's not going to happen until next year. It's not going to get rolled out until next year. The government's only purchased 100 million doses. I got news for you. There are over 330 million people in the United States. So 230 million of you got to figure out where the hell you're going to get your vaccine and how much it's going to cost. If your insurance is going to pay for it, like all of these things. And, the fact that this was never an important thing for Mitch McConnell.
Right.
He just, left Washington and has been blowing off everything. And there are 140,000 people who have died, and he's letting this bill sit on his desk. We just talked last week about how a third of Americans couldn't pay their mortgage or their rent. It's the third month in a row that has been over 30%. People are saying we're going to have a housing crisis by September, October. So the fact that this is not a sense of urgency is just beyond me. Like, how do you not know that something huge is happening? One of the things that I read today that really scared the hell out of me, Catherine Rampell in the Washington Post said that she is concerned that this is really a plot for Trump to basically burn the bridge behind him as he's going down. And I'm not just talking about, like, you know, screw everybody. You know, I'm talking about he's putting people in place who will hurt the country. You know, people who don't believe in the Federal Reserve, who are being passed into the Federal Reserve as new governors of the board. You know, there are a lot of things that he is trying to leave his mark, and it's not a mark like, you know, oh, I want conservative, whatever. He's like trying to destroy as much as he can before he leaves.
No, this is scorched earth. There's no question about that.
And I wonder if that is the Republicans' plot so that they can then distract Democrats with, oh my God, we have to fix all of this stuff in the country. Or if this is like, the hill is so hard to climb, it's going to take more than 4 years to do it. So if Democrats can't do it in 2 years, they're just like, oh, see, they don't know what they're doing. And it's just, the idea that we are playing politics right now is just beyond me. Like, what happened to the party of, you know, back in the day, whenever people actually, you know, when stuff went down, you know, when the stuff hit the fan, everybody was like, okay, hold up, like, let's fix this real fast, and then we can go back to our regular, you know, screaming at each other.
Yeah, what happened to the family values folks? What happened to the life? What happened to the pro-life folks? You know, what happened to the states' rights folks? Where are all those factions of the Republican Party? They're nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. All of these people who claim to be Republicans who now don't support the state's right to do whatever they want, require masks or not. The Republicans who say that they're pro-life, but they're encouraging elderly people to sacrifice themselves for the economy. Yeah, these people are all full of crap. And I think we knew that, right? Like, people like you and me, we've known that for years.
Sure.
That these people were just completely, you know.
I've always said the Republican Party is the party of scorched earth. I've always said that Trump was possible. And, you know, back in 2016, I said in April of 2016 he was going to win, and it was going to be really bad. I'll be honest, you know, I didn't have my crystal ball, you know, tuned up at the time. I didn't imagine it would be this bad. Knew it was going to be bad, not this bad.
Sometimes I feel like my hope and idealism sort of shrouds my judgment. I heard Stacey Abrams doing an interview the other day where she talked about how she still has hope, and I was like, oh my God, finally. I'm like the only one out there who still, like, actually genuinely has hope in humanity and feels like, all right, people are going to, for every idiot Karen or Kevin that there is in a Walmart or a Costco, there are people all over the country who are sewing masks because they don't have anything else to do and they want to help. So I do think that for every horrible person, there really are amazing people doing incredible, generous, thoughtful, loving, and compassionate things for the rest of the country, and I wish we could focus more on them.
I'm right there with you. No, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in Portland. The fact that, you know, people came out in the face of the kind of oppressive, authoritarian move that Trump tried with sending in, I think it's Border Patrol tactical units and U.S. Marshals tactical units, you know, dressed up like mercenaries. They reacted, I think, appropriately by having more people come out in the streets. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by the younger generation saying, hell no, we're not taking it anymore. Good on them. It's about time. But let me ask you the other
mom.
Exactly. And don't forget the dads with the leaf blowers. I thought that was great too.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you because I'm seeing the Republican Party kind of splinter a little bit, and I wanted to get your take on what's going on with Liz Cheney. Not a Cheney fan by any stretch of the imagination. As the spawn of Darth Cheney, I have no hope for her saving the Republic. But do you see her? I'm just curious. Do you see her, kind of splitting off, seeing what's coming, so that maybe she runs for president in a couple of years? Because I don't know if you've been paying attention to this whole dust up going on, but it seems like she's trying to get away from the Trump cult.
What's interesting about Liz Cheney is I don't think that there's necessarily anything controversial about what she said. And I imagine that Liz Cheney was not necessarily making some sort of calculated political decision whenever she said, what she said. I think she was like, oh, well, this makes sense. This is logical. This is what everybody would think. And then all of a sudden, these like crazy right-wing nut bars just started attacking her. And she's got to just be like, wait, what? Like, I thought all that was for show, right? and I think she's having this rude awakening of it's just like, oh no, there's no real difference between crazy and the Republican Party anymore. Like, welcome to reality, Liz Cheney.
So then I'm giving her too much credit, you think?
Yeah, way too much credit.
Okay,
I don't think there's anything calculated, and there's no way in hell that she could make it through a presidential race.
Because I was just thinking, man, this seems like a good time to kind of make that move because all of the governor, the Republican governors, are going to go down in flames as the virus basically engulfs their states, and probably the rest of us too. This is a good time to stake your ground on some logic and get away from the Trump cult.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if that's, but I don't think that there's any way for her to really do it. Like she's Dick Cheney's kid. And I think it's really going to take maybe 10, 15, 20 years before people really forget. Like you think about how much people hated Hillary Clinton. People hate Dick Cheney that same way, if not more. And he still has really, really terrible polling numbers. And I don't think that he'll ever have good polling numbers. So like, you got to let like a whole generation, a couple of generations of people die before you're going to be able to run.
You really think he's hated more than Hillary Clinton?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Wow. See,
I wouldn't be surprised.
I know he was polling right around cockroaches and syphilis, but I think we're right there with Hillary. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he just, for the shady, sketchy things that he did that were so incredibly obvious, there are documentaries. There are like he appeared on what's his name show and talked about waterboarding. Oh my God, why can't I remember it? Showtime, the hair, dresses up in the different costumes, the comedian. Oh, speaking of short-term memory.
Yeah, I don't have those things. I'm not rich.
Right. So, I mean, this is still a thing. The waterboarding thing is still a thing. Gitmo is still open.
Right.
It is still there. And until it's not, I mean, this is going to be the idea of torture and the stuff that we did to people in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, that's not going to go away.
No, I'm with you. Last thing I've got for you. Normally, I don't ask your opinion of the craziest story of the week, but I'm curious. What does Sarah think is the craziest story of the week?
The one, the black man who bought a bicycle I think it may have been a Walmart, perhaps, and was riding it out and got arrested. That one just, I mean, really? He bought a bicycle, he's riding it out, and they arrested him for it. I don't even know what charge there was. I don't think they thought that he was stealing it. I think they just, like, some woman lost her mind about it, and all of a sudden the poor guy's in the back of a police car. Right? Like, that one was the worst this week, I think.
Welcome to America. And on that, I appreciate the time, Sarah. I appreciate it. Good stuff as always. Always fun.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Be careful. Be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Raw Story. Make sure you check out their work. Always good stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We're here today to announce the arrest of Larry Householder, the Speaker of the House of the State of Ohio.
Powerful Republican arrested on bribery charges in corrupt utility company conspiracy. Gonzalo breaks new record in already historic 2020 hurricane season. Global methane emissions hit record high. Plus,
My cow ain't farting. Must be me.
Burger King cuts the methane.
Thank you, Your Highness. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Burger King's latest sustainability effort is to reduce cow farts. Here's a free tip. You want to make sure the cows fart less? Don't feed them Burger King.
Also, that will be cannibalism. Unless you're going to feed them the actual king. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, huge story out of the Buckeye State this week concerning energy, utility companies, Republicans, and corruption.
Indeed, stunning levels of corruption were exposed in the electric utility industry this week, and not only by Republicans.
What?
In Illinois, Commonwealth Edison, a subsidiary of U.S. energy giant Exelon, agreed to pay a $200 million fine in a deferred prosecution deal to settle charges in a long-running bribery scheme in which the utility admits to giving financial benefits to people close to a high-ranking state official in exchange for special preferential treatment in the state legislature. That official is widely assumed to be longtime Illinois Democratic House Speaker Michael Madigan, who has not been charged.
Oops.
But the really big utility bribery scandal this week was in Ohio, with the arrest of Ohio's Republican House Speaker Larry Householder.
And 4 other defendants for racketeering in relation to what is likely the largest bribery, money laundering scheme ever perpetrated against the people of the state of Ohio.
That was U.S. Attorney for Ohio David DeVillers, who announced Speaker Householder was charged with running a years-long $60 million bribery and money laundering scheme to pass a $1.5 billion law last year that forced consumers to bail out monopoly utility First Energy's unprofitable nuclear and coal plants, while also gutting the state's renewable energy industry. All in exchange for $61 million in dark money that Householder used to profit himself and elect Republican candidates to the Ohio State Legislature in 2018.
So a huge scandal. Ratepayers were forced to pay more money, all to bail out some coal plants and a couple of nuclear plants, and yes, line the pockets of these Republicans. It was an extraordinary scheme. Finally, they broke it up, and I think there are going to be more arrests still to come.
Yep, the sordid tale of greed, corruption, and self-dealing in Ohio combines monopoly utility power, regulatory capture, and unaccountable dark money in elections.
So what else is new?
In other news, another new record set in the already historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, newly named Gonzalo, now churning toward the Caribbean, fueled by near-record warm ocean waters, has broken the record for the earliest 7th named tropical storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. While it's still too soon to know Gonzalo's trajectory, it is always a good idea for folks in hurricane-prone areas to get ready, since U.S. emergency response is now complicated by the coronavirus.
And being forced into shelters during a global pandemic is not going to be a good idea.
Nope. Global methane emissions have reached a new record high, rising 9% since the early 2000s. According to two new studies, the researchers found human activity responsible for more than half of all methane emissions, and those were primarily from agriculture, especially rice and cattle farming, but also coal mining, leaks from oil and gas drilling, and landfills. Because methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide on shorter timescales, the studies show that methane is a growing threat in the fight to slow man-made climate change. Finally, after the successful launch of its meat-free Impossible Burger, fast food giant Burger King has introduced its reduced methane Whopper, claiming that adding lemongrass to cattle feed reduces up to 30% of climate-warming methane emissions from cattle. They even rolled out a fun commercial with young viral video yodeler Mason Ramsey
singing about cow farts.
So to change their emissions, Burger King went on a mission, testing diets that would help reduce their farts. That's a start. And now there ain't no question that it's health and cow suggestion, adding lemongrass so they can play their part. Woo-hoo.
But scientists testing Burger King's claim found it only reduced methane 3%, not 30%. They note other feed additives would provide even greater methane reductions, and of course, not eating meat at all would provide the most.
Yes, it would. Either way, I'm grateful to His Majesty for even trying. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And, you know, it's been 30 years already. I remember it being passed. I remember H.W. Bush signing it into law. And I remember, you know, euphoria from the disability crowd. And I remember going, I wonder if H.W. actually knows what he just did. Because it's a wonderful, incredible piece of legislation and gives people, gives them rights, gives some bit of equality for those who are disabled. But at the time, I kind of wondered. But here we are 30 years later, and after 30 years of constant conservative attacks and corporate attacks, it's still mostly intact. And here to share some thoughts on where we are, how we got here, and maybe sadly where things might be going. I've asked Valerie Novak to come talk with us. She's a fellow at the Center for American Progress, America Progress's Disability Justice Initiative. Valerie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So 30 years it has been since George H.W. Bush signed this historic piece of legislation into law. How's it worked so far, do you think?
There has, like you mentioned, I don't know if anybody quite knew what they were getting into. It's been a battle, and it continues to be a battle, but also tremendous progress. There have been amendments that have had to come out. We've had Supreme Court cases. We're still discussing, even though it was 30 years ago, which both feels very far and not very long ago, we didn't really have things like home internet, for example. And so there's a lot of things that are still trying to be figured out when it comes to the ADA. But at the same time, we have protections in schools and access to buildings and protections in work and resources. And so there's also a tremendous amount of access that's come out of this civil rights legislation.
What's interesting to me is, and I read your article, Hands Off the ADA. The thing that jumped out at me is you say that approximately 70% of working age people who are disabled are not employed, and you go, this was supposed to really help move them into the workforce and give them the equal opportunity and the dignity that comes with work. Wouldn't someone say that after these years it hasn't worked out as well as we? And because I think it's a wonderful thing, but maybe as well as we had hoped.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. I think part of what that 70% is the getting in the door part, and we see this for a lot of people with different marginalized identities, right? Is that the ADA provides protections and accommodations for when somebody gets hired, but it's still that personal bias and stigma of getting that job.
Right.
This isn't really in there, but I can tell you anecdotally, the difference in responses I have if I'm looking for a job when I mark that little box that says whether or not I'm disabled versus when I don't is pretty outstanding. I have talked to peers and colleagues who have said that they looked for jobs for years, and that the moment that they stopped marking that they were disabled on that little demographic box, they were getting callbacks after years and years of looking for jobs.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, even though we have these protections, we're still limited by what other people think that we can do.
No, and,
I'm
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, or I mean, there's some people, I don't know how many times I've looked at this where there's an assumption about what somebody's going to need, and a hiring manager or an HR person automatically thinks, oh, well, it's going to be too expensive to accommodate them, so I'm not even going to go forward. And of course, they're not going to say that out loud because then it's illegal, right? But there's some other reason that maybe they don't make it to the top of the pile to get that job in the first place.
Right. And isn't this one of those moments where you go, maybe it's time to ban that box? I mean, we've gone through this with criminal records and people who have had, felonies in the past that have done their time and are moving back into society. Shouldn't we do this with this as well?
I think that we need the numbers. I think it's important to know things like this. I always get confused on how it works, because when you apply for a job, supposedly it says on there in big letters that this doesn't go to the same place that your HR information does, right? So it's supposed to be separate, yet somehow we find these connections. So part of me says, while for somebody who does research like I do, it's really useful to know that 70% of working age disabled people are not employed. At the same time, how many of those people aren't employed because of that box, right? So I think I definitely think there's room to have that conversation, and maybe that should be something that we're not asking.
Yeah, at the end of it, it's curious how they're not supposed to go to this same place, but it's just curious how, I hear the same stories that you hear as soon as I stopped checking that box. And a lot of it was with people with criminal records who had done something stupid when they were young, and it followed them, well into their 40s, 50s and beyond. And then when they said, hey, I just stopped checking yes, and hopefully they never found out, I got jobs. And, that's kind of where my thought was on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if there's a better way of getting that information where it really doesn't go, or maybe we just shouldn't be asking those questions in the first place. I know so many people who've been fighting for the ban the box when it comes to formerly incarcerated people because of those same kinds of ideas or stigmas that follow people around, and a lot of times for people who have no lived experience of what it's like to be in that place, right? And it's just purely going off of narratives that they've heard from other people or from TV or from wherever. Yeah.
And in that same kind of line, I probably should have started here to begin with about what is the ADA, because a lot of people have this view that, it's just what made them put ramps and sidewalks and make, buildings a little more accessible. And, we've all been in the workplace where, someone's asked for an accommodation. So maybe that would have been a better place to start, because I think a lot of folks don't actually know what the ADA covers. So can we go back and pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, because not only do a lot of people not know what it covers, but I think because of how we think about disability, a lot of people think it doesn't or will never apply to them. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed back in 1990. It's a very, very comprehensive anti-discrimination rights bill for people with disabilities, also people who are assumed to be disabled, which we can talk about a little bit later if we need to get into that. But it covers, it has several titles in there. It covers employment. It covers places of public accommodation, which is a lot of times any place that's servicing the public, right? So things like restaurants. There are colleges are covered under the ADA. The biggest one that you hear about, I think, kind of in your day-to-day is going to be employment. That's where a lot of people think of, like you said, they think of work accommodations, but even things like temporary, what we would call disability, which they define as like a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities. And so for people who are recovering from substance abuse, for example, might be covered under this. There are some instances where if you're pregnant, you might be covered under this, right? So things that maybe we don't think of as, oh, that person is disabled, but there is something that is affecting their ability to participate in work or to participate in life activities that would then be protected under this act, whether that's in, going to a restaurant or getting accommodations through your job or, being treated equally at college.
We all hear the employment stories. As someone who spent most of my working life in the trucking industry, everyone's heard the story of the guy who was like 600-700 pounds who filed a lawsuit under the ADA because they wanted, a bigger cab for him to be in. And everyone's heard those kind of stories, and it's usually, always posed in an extremely negative way, in my view, as a way to attack the ADA. I'm curious your thought.
Yeah, and not only is it a way to both attack the person, right, and the ADA, but we often don't think about the other side of that, is that often what we hear about people who are, say, on Social Security disability insurance is, especially from, certain political ideologies, is, oh, well, that person's lazy, or they're just, mooching off the government, they don't want to work, what have you. But then at the same time, there's this other side where if they are trying to fight to get accommodation so that they can work, people are saying, oh, well, they're just trying to abuse this law, right? So it's almost like a no-win situation when people are really just trying to go out and be productive and pay their bills.
No, that's an absolute excellent point, and one I got to tell you, I've not thought of from that perspective of, here's the guy who he wants to keep working, he could easily probably have gotten Social Security disability and stayed home, but no, the guy's fighting to keep his job. And look, because I've seen some people who've been fighting for simple things, and it's amazing to me how much employers put up a fuss. I mean, I remember, a couple of years ago, we got involved with a retail store that wouldn't give chairs to a pregnant woman to sit down while doing her job, just to take a break. And it was just one of those things where it was too much. It should have been much easier.
All the time. I don't know how many times I have heard really kind of things that you would think are common sense. And I think we're seeing that actually a lot right now because of COVID. And there's kind of been a bit of an uproar from a lot of people who are either disabled and have been working or are disabled and have been trying to get jobs with remote working. The amount of people who have requested accommodations for at-home working, for flexible scheduling, who have constantly been told, oh, well, that's not something that we do. And then within a matter of weeks, entire industries going remote, when for years people have tried to get those accommodations, has been really upsetting to a lot of people in the disability community because we always knew that it was possible. And we're constantly told, well, that's not something we do, right? And now tons of people are being able to benefit from that. So hopefully that's something that continues. But something like chairs, you have entire grocery chains that you go in and people are sitting, but then this particular, grocery store, that's not something we can do, right? Or you hear about, part of what we talk about in the report is, people fighting back on the financial feasibility. And I've seen people, I think the average accommodation in an employment setting costs less than $500. But sometimes you have these businesses that take in millions and millions of dollars in profit, talking about how some kind of accommodation that costs $200 is not financially feasible for them to do. And so a lot of times the stories you hear about how people are abusing the ADA is really just employers not wanting to do what their employees need. And it's really usually some very simple fix or a one-time adjustment, a one-time purchase of a certain kind of computer software or something like that, that then allows them to work as long as they're with that company.
Yeah, it's incredible that that you see this kind of stuff go on. So we're at this moment now, and I'm sure you've seen the talk over the stimulus bill and how they want to give employers immunity over workers getting sick on the job. And again, this just to me is another one of those steps back to the bad old days. There's an attack on the ADA. There has been for a number of years, and my fear is that out of this crisis, we see even more attacks coming. Are there things that you're seeing as someone who I would consider as the expert in this conversation as an attack coming in the near future?
I think there's always an attack. I think what people aren't realizing is part of what's scary about COVID is not exactly knowing what it's doing. And some of the science that's coming out and some of the studies that are coming out on people who have received it, who have gotten COVID and gotten better, is the long-term damage. I've seen things about 30% less lung function. They're talking about potential brain damage. People are having strokes. And so I think what some of these business owners that are lobbying for this kind of immunity aren't thinking about is that if they bring all these people back to work and even a percentage of these people get sick, what we're going to end up with is just more disabled people in the workplace. I have no problem with more disabled people in the workplace, but if you're trying to get around accommodations, if you're trying to fight against the ADA, probably putting your workforce in a position where a percentage of them may end up permanently or temporarily disabled going forward is probably not the choice you actually want to make. Right. Because if you're doing something that, say, some of these, for example, factory workers that are on their feet all day, if you get COVID and end up having some kind of lung problem or having some kind of neurological problem where you can't stand on your feet all day, now you are having to accommodate that percentage of your workforce that got sick. So it really is not in their best interest for multiple reasons. But if the ADA has specifically been something that they have pushed back against, which a lot of these employers have, they're really not thinking very clearly about what the future picture is going to look like, trying to open up and bring further risk of sickness to their workforce.
That's an excellent point. If you're not in favor of having so many disabled people in the workplace, let's not make more.
Right.
It just seems kind of simple to me. So let me ask you this, because now this has opened up a whole nother line of thought for me, because I've talked about just a second ago and for the past couple of weeks, ever since it popped up, since Mitch McConnell dreamt up the idea of giving this immunity shield to employers. How much of that do you think could filter down to disability? Because, as you said, you could have a situation where you have 30% less lung capacity. You could have neurological damage. You could have a bunch of stuff that we don't even know yet. Would they then be shielded from that? Just claiming, hey, that's COVID related. Hey, we've got immunity to that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, of course, we're looking at future projections, but there's nothing in the ADA that would say, and I don't know that they could write it. I don't think that there would be anything McConnell could write that says, well, if you have a disability due to COVID, you're no longer covered under ADA. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't try. People have tried all kinds of ways to get out of having to honor the ADA, but I think especially because as far as a lot of the documentation that HR employees might request, it's really just going to be the doctor saying, oh, you have this lung capacity problem. It's not going to be, oh, you have a lung capacity problem due to COVID, right? But we do know that this gets really scary and really dangerous very quick. Even the first people I saw asking for immunity was nursing homes. And we know that about 50%, if not more, of the deaths that have happened because of COVID are from nursing homes. And so if we start getting more of these kind of congregate settings, like people working in a group, and employers making these decisions thinking, well, hey, I'm not going to get in trouble regardless of what happens, I can only think that the outcome is going to equal many more disabled people and many more deaths, all for the sake of what people think is profit. But, dead people can't spend money. So I really think a lot of these employers that are kind of thinking this way are not really thinking long term. They're thinking profit at the end of this quarter.
Yeah, but that's the American way right there. You just targeted American capitalism. It's all about the end of the quarter. We don't care about the second quarter or any time else, or especially don't care about those workers. It's about how much we can shove in our pocket at the end of the quarter. Last question I've got for you, Valerie, because I wanted to bring this up a little earlier, but we keep seeing because of the pandemic and the virus, we keep seeing people running around with these ADA supposed cards. And I've seen a couple of them. I had people email me and say, hey, I got one of these cards. I don't have to wear a mask. Is there anywhere you can get an ADA card that says you don't have to wear a mask?
No, that is absolutely not something that you can get. And people are it is so destructive, not only to yourself, not only to the people around you, but there are legitimate people who cannot wear masks for a myriad of reasons. And the people who are willfully abusing ADA protections, so that they can run around and endanger people is selfish on a level that my brain can't comprehend. But no, there is no place, you can't go to some government building and get your specific ADA card. And it'll be really interesting. I'm waiting to see some of the stories that might come out of people who've tried this, because I think the people who are trying to take advantage of this with their little cards, I feel like probably have no idea how frustrating it actually is to try to use the ADA to get access to something. It is not this get out of jail free card that people seem to think it is. And a lot of times, even with the ADA, like you said, it's been 30 years, but we've been fighting for 30 years.
Right.
And the amount of places you still can't get into, or the amount of accommodations you still can't get regardless of the ADA, is astounding. So it'll be interesting to see what some of the pushback some of these people might get. And I think we're seeing this with kind of some of the temper tantrums we've seen people throwing when they've been rejected from a store for wearing a mask regardless, right? Because for a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, they don't care what the ADA says. And unless you're going to sue them over it, they're going to do what they want to do. And I think for some people that are trying to use this to get out of wearing masks, they're going to be in for a harsh realization that a lot of business owners like them don't care.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's where my thought is. The people who are gonna flash me that card and say, "Oh, I've got a disability," and that precludes me from being able to have to wear this, and I have all this. I would think someone who truly does have a disability is probably taking this virus pretty seriously, and they're possibly more vulnerable than everyone else, and that they would do everything they could possibly do to protect themselves and not try and flaunt the fact that they're not going to wear a mask and make up a little card to carry around with them.
Yep. I mean, a lot of those people are still and have been quarantined in their houses because other people aren't being responsible, because other people are running around with those cards, right? And so those, our neighbors and our fellow U.S. residents are sitting in their home for 120 days because the rest of us won't wear a mask.
Yeah, it's crazy. Again, so what should we do? I guess I want to finish up with an action. What should people be doing to ensure that we protect the ACA, make sure that it continues? Any action, anything people should be doing?
Yeah, I think if you are in a position where you are a business owner, where you're a regular patron of some place, where you're in HR or hiring, that it is also important for us that maybe don't need certain access requirements to be aware where those do and don't exist. And we can advocate. A lot of times when it comes to the ADA, we might not be able to, I'm not telling people to go out and try to start suing people, but even something as simple as, people never think about this stuff, but as simple as when you invite your friends out, I don't know how many times I've had to ask, well, is that place accessible? And people have no idea. They've never had to pay attention to whether or not there's a ramp at the front or whether or not the bathroom is on the same floor, right? Even stuff like that is useful, but especially for people who are in a position where they can hire, to try to cast off some of the preconceived notions you have. There's websites like the Job Action Network that have tons and tons of resources if you are somebody who wants to try to hire more disabled people on, how you can accommodate different kinds of disabilities. There's tons of information out there. And then also to protect it when this stuff comes up. Legislation for the last several years has popped up at the state level for different kinds of attacks against the ADA. And a lot of people have no idea what that is, so they don't speak on it. But when those pop up, you have a voice, whether or not you're disabled, to say, hey, I don't want my representative to support that. Hey, I don't want my state to pass that bill. And so when you see that, not to just cast it off and be like, well, I'm not disabled because tomorrow you might be. But even if you're not, maybe your neighbor is, and they also need that protection.
There you go. Good stuff, Valerie. I appreciate the time. Really great talking with you.
No problem. Thanks.
Good stuff. Valerie Novak. She is she's a fellow at the Center for American Progress's Disability Justice Initiative. You want to check out their website, AmericanProgress.org is their website. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at their work, and especially their piece on hands off the ADA. Quick break.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Really quick how the time ends up. 2 hours goes by way too fast. Appreciate you tuning in. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And like I said, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. What an interesting week it has been. We've had authoritarian rule. We've had back and forth on convention, no convention for the GOP. How much crazier can it get moving forward? That is the question. We will be taking Friday off. We were going to get a little more work done around the office. We will be back on Monday, just swamped with all kinds of stuff. If you've got something on your mind, we'd love to hear it. Share your stories, your questions, your comments. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com, or direct message us on Twitter. But have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.